Yeah, here we go. There we go.
Okay, well, it looks like we're having our usual meeting, except someone different is recording it. So we'll see how this goes. Um, this is our May, what is it today? Second meeting, 2026 of the Hard Science Fiction Zoom group. And we are very proud and happy to have our guest speaker, Sonja Fritzsche from Michigan State University, who is a big expert on Cold War science fiction, especially a couple in East Germany. Could you remind me of their names? Jan.
Oh, Johanna and Gunther Braun. I'm working on a piece on them, and then Karl-Heinz and Angela Steinmüller.
Okay, so there are a couple from the old days of the Cold War in East Germany that Sonja has done many years of research on this, but also in a broader way, she's the editor of, are you an editor of the whole series on global science
Yeah,
fiction?
I'm the founder of the series and co-editor with Jerry Canavan. We were here, was it last fall? And I think we talked a
That's
little
right.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if it was just that one volume, but it's the whole series.
Mhm.
And this is continuing Forey Ackerman's wonderful work that he did in the real Cold War years and also went to Japan before that was the thing to do after World War II. So there are people in science fiction that don't just blast them and take over the planet. There are people who feel that the kinds of simulations and dreams that people come up with for perhaps getting along better and meeting people who are different, not just blast them away, are out there. And one of our favorites was our friend Forey. So that's why the whole series is named after him. So, in a true legacy or heir of Forey is Sonja Fritzsche, Professor Sonja Fritzsche from Michigan State. So I will now turn it over to her. She has so many awards and positions that some are listed, but we can just look into that later.
Well, and that doesn't matter. What's most important is what we're going to talk about today, because what I also remember is that I got so many wonderful questions last time, and I really look forward to that. And thank you for contacting me again, Gloria. And as I was saying, actually, while you were out for a little bit, I was so intrigued by this group because you have been putting up such wonderful videos of so many very interesting colleagues of mine, and I was saying that it's a tremendous resource up on YouTube that you have compiled. I point people to it and say, "Hey, I know so and so did a talk here. Go listen." For my students, it's very, very useful resource. So I'm very pleased to be back. First of all, I'm an honored to be back, and also then this is the topic that you asked me to speak on really is at the core of my whole career, to be perfectly honest. And so, in preparing my remarks for today, it gave me an opportunity to reflect on that, and I very much appreciate that. I think what I'll do is go ahead and share some slides here. If you just give me a second, I have to get to the correct screen and then make sure I'm sharing here. And can everyone see that now? Let me see, I minimize
Yeah,
this too.
yes.
Yeah, okay, good, good.
I can't. I still can't. I don't know what's happening. But that as long
Yeah,
as everybody else can, don't worry about me.
as long as everyone else can and that it shows up on the recording, then
That'd be fine. Oh,
hopefully
I can
that'll.
see it now.
Oh,
My
you can. Okay, good. And I'll try and describe it a little bit too. So what I also renamed it a little bit because in doing work with folks from all over the world and different backgrounds, who bring different knowledge in, I also have been told very quickly, I don't do science fiction, I do futurisms, is what I've been told. And you're thinking in terms of the Afrofuturism, Indigenous futurism, African futurism movements, and a number of others that really have identities of not coming from the Western tradition of science fiction, but alternate traditions. And so I wanted to name that and say if I'm talking about global, I have to say global science fiction futurisms, and we could even add, of course, speculative fiction in there to broaden that, and then for global understanding. I'm currently director of teaching and learning in the College of Arts and Letters at Michigan State University. I'm a professor of German studies there in the Department of Linguistics, Languages, and Cultures. And I also always want to say that Michigan State University, which is a critical land grant institution, we always have to talk about the land upon which we sit. That is the lands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples, also known as Potawatomi. And their word for this area, and I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but I'll do my best, Nuechong, that means where the rivers meet, which is where the Cedar River and the Grand River meet that then flow out to Lake Michigan. So I want to also acknowledge that my university is on their land, and that we're also talking about a globe upon which there has been a lot of taking of land and of projecting of frontiers that has also gone out to the universe. And we have to always be thinking in terms of the post-colonial, decolonializing of how empire has worked, not only in political power, but also in cultural power, in the power of text, the power of word. And that's part of what my whole project is about broadly, and some of the things that I want to talk about today. I'll first give you a few details about my own background in this context and how I've come to be where I am. Second, I'll talk about the growth of the study of global science fiction and futurisms over the past 20 years. Of course, it's been going on a lot longer than that, but just really focusing on this tremendous growth and pointing out challenges still. There are a lot of them, but there's so many more people at the round table now. It's a wonderful thing, and it's really flourishing. And then third, I want to talk about some current events and efforts in the broader field to continue that work. So let me go to there's the next slide. So I always like to start with one of my favorite authors, Ursula K. Le Guin, who was also published in Eastern Europe, and it just really comes from a space that I really admire. To shape a new world, we have to imagine it first, and this comes from her well-known essay, The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction. And saying here, really thinking about that word, we have to imagine it first, and thinking in terms of what are the borders around our imagination? What are we unable to imagine because of our own experiences that aren't really truly reaching out and bringing in the experiences of others, and thinking in terms of how can we make sure that we are expanding the opportunities and inviting in everyone's knowledge to help us imagine what this new world might be. That's why I wanted to start with this, because that's a really, really important thought, and that's an excellent essay. And then I also want to bring in our wonderful colleague Bodhi, who's part of this tremendous effort called Co-Futures at the University of Oslo. If you haven't heard of him, if you haven't been to that website and read about their work, make sure you go check it out. In a recent essay, or I should say recent, it's been a while, in 2013, recentering science fiction and the fantastic, what would a non-Anglo-centric understanding of science fiction and fantasy look like? I really like this quote that a non-Anglo-centric understanding of science fiction and fantasy must open up the genre towards the dialectic of local and universal, rather than being aligned towards the one or the other. It's a constant mixing of perspectives, not only local and universal, but also thinking about the notions of high and low culture, how those have been dismantled. That has helped this understanding. Thinking in terms of the move from just literature to then, of course, to film, but then now broader media studies, bringing in so many more different types of ways of expressing this. And then also, as I'll talk about more, geographical location, thinking in terms of how that processing and bringing into the field has shifted in perspective as well. So I would just a few words about myself first, and this is sort of more contemporary, but I wanted to back up a little bit that I have always believed in the power of individual people like ourselves, and I'm speaking with about every single person in this room, working for global understanding. This is not just the efforts of politicians and diplomats or presidents and provosts, but we lead every day in that space. And I saw this growing up because I witnessed this firsthand as a child of a faculty member. who valued the international colleagues in the department. We didn't have money to travel overseas. We did a lot of traveling in the States with our camper. But my parents instead welcomed in new and visiting faculty into their homes all of the time. Because this was the 1970s and the 80s, these faculty, who were often newer to the United States, were from Iran, of course, because the Iranian Revolution had just taken place, Greece, India, Egypt, Israel. My sister and I played with their children, and we're still in contact with some of them today, I'm very pleased to say. We would talk through global events with these folks. We would ask about their various perspectives. What are they seeing going on across the world? And we would understand those events in different and more nuanced ways because of these family on family conversations that we were all working on global understanding in that way. And it really enriched my growing up and taught me some important skills that on 9/11, I knew people who were Muslim, and I knew that not all Muslims were like that, right? That was very quickly just not even possible for me to say. So I've always been able to draw upon and understand the richness and of perspective and knowledge that all different types of people bring. And I treasure that. And it's really just the simple step of reaching out and seeing someone. And I do this in practice. If I'm at a conference, wherever I'm working in my neighborhood, if I see someone who's new, I make sure to reach out to them and talk with them, provide them with a sense of belonging. I can't tell you how many times at conferences international faculty visiting are sort of kind of left on the sidelines in the social events. People don't necessarily go up with them, people don't talk with them. And I always make a point to say, "Hi, I'm so excited that you're here." And I don't say, "Where are you from?" Right? That's not what I do. I start talking about more general things and share information about my background and wait for them to volunteer things so I don't put them on the spot. And I also don't want to ask that question and then have someone say, "Well, I was born in this country, and I've been here all along," right? Or I came here 10 years ago. And people see me sometimes as having been born in Germany with my last name that everyone mispronounces all of the time. So I just get used to this. And you want to take these people and make sure to make people feel like they belong. And then you will also learn an awful lot. It's very valuable. I think there was a question. I don't know if somebody wanted to ask a question or in the chat. Maybe
I
not.
just want to say, I know I mispronounced your name. It's
No, you didn't actually. You did just
Fritzsche,
fine. It's Sonja
Fritzsche,
Fritzsche. Yeah, it
or
was absolutely
Fritzsche, or
fine.
Fritzsche. I like Nietzsche, Fritzsche,
Yeah, Fritzsche, Fritzsche.
Fritzsche, Fritzsche. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Did it
hmm
okay then.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I go to Germany, people pronounce it Fritzsche. And so I sort of have this alter ego that was created when I started studying German. And that's the next thing I wanted to say was I started studying German really as a gateway to other cultures. It's I have German heritage, but I never spoke it in the home. And I really saw it as a way to meet people from other places and get me overseas. And I grew up during the Cold War, during the German Marshall Plan. There was a lot of money for students to go abroad at that time to Germany. And I was very lucky to benefit from that. And I've learned a lot about the complexities, of course, of Germany, Europe. You'll see here, I've got the Brandenburger Gate. And this has been, in my experience, I've spent about 5 years in Berlin in different times in different places. And it has become a hub of protest and very much tied also always to what's going on in the United States. You'll see here on the right-hand side, here's a picture of one of those protests. Europe is colorful, right? And that this is a protest. These are different protests here. That's not necessarily that one, but wanting to recognize people from different backgrounds. And this other photo on the upper right-hand side is from Bergmannstraße, which is a Turkish section of town, also much more international now since the fall of the wall and reunification. And I see Berlin as this wonderful place that brings people together now. Of course, it has a very complex history of very dark times when that was absolutely not the case. But I see it now as a wonderful place where people can come together, get different perspectives. And I then have appreciate that work. I came to science fiction really also from, and I took this, I used this particular picture because I thought it really showed my understanding of the world in sort of simplistic terms when I started a lot of this in college and then graduate school, and then I liked the bringing together of the books and particularly the importance of sustainability. But the concept of the globe through science fiction has become so much more complex over the past 20 years. I loved to study it because I always saw it as discussing this notion of difference. How can we think about the other? How can we process these fears, these fascinations, the philosophy about the other, often in terms of gender, technology, and different folks from different places? And how is that treated in science fiction and the futurisms worked through? It's another space for us to be doing that. And then to understand, right? I mean, this is the classic Suvin type of theory, and I've always been very drawn to it. I know that there are many, many challenges with it too, and science fiction futurism serves many other purposes, but that was what originally drew me to it, and also this ability to see other worlds. And in my sense, I then worked a lot on the Cold War in science fiction because that was the other for me at that time. That was, I did very much in my history degree focused on East Germans as the other, and then very quickly moving into science fiction and thinking in terms of what were the dreams of this other part of Europe. What futures did they see, and what did that tell us about their present? And that has always been my thoughts. And how can I understand the history through the science fiction that they were creating? My this is then the work that I've done. And very quickly, and I wanted to, of course, include Metropolis here because I wanted to allude to Forry Ackerman and knowing that this was one of his films that he was so fascinated with and embraced, and of course, also recorded. Also purchased wonderful pieces of the set. I also last time mentioned to Gloria and the folks that were on the call that when I went to Berlin, I met a fan there who had met Forry Ackerman when he traveled to Berlin. And then this friend of mine, Anita Winkler is her name, and I'll actually see her this summer. I'm looking forward to it. She then actually traveled to Los Angeles and took him seriously when he said, "Come and visit me." And she knocked on his door, and they had a wonderful conversation. And so to be part of this Forry Ackerman Memorial Lecture Series is a real honor, and I want to make sure to bring that full circle with this film. But when I also was studying German science fiction, I quickly began to understand that a lot of my colleagues first were coming from English. There were very few people in the different second language departments that were working on science fiction. So a lot of the work that was being done was in English. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But I just really quickly discovered that this was very limited. I apologize that my headphones are constantly falling out here. Um, but that I saw really these linguistic borders that were keeping people from seeing and understanding the true richness of science fiction around the globe because they just couldn't access it. And then not only could they not access it linguistically, but then they didn't understand the cultures, how the local culture, how the regional culture was shaping the science fiction that also then was increasingly in dialogue with the international genre. The East Germans who I was working on were always in dialogue with things that were being published in the East Bloc and the West Bloc. I mean, the border might have been guarded by guards with machine guns who had orders to shoot on sight, but the text, words, knowledge, culture flowed in ways above the table and under the table and in private libraries and passing through books when people visited in very careful ways. So, but at the same time, people didn't always understand truly. They would take their own frame of reference and apply it to, say, Metropolis and see wonderful things in it, but not, there was a whole other side, right, that was rooted in German history and in European history and modernity more broadly that maybe wasn't always seen. And then it was always Metropolis. I was thinking, but there are all these other films out there. Why isn't anyone talking about them? It's not, this isn't the only thing. And I quickly noticed that that was really true of, there was the Anglo-American science fiction, then there was sort of the rest of the world, and the rest of the world included often film because that was easier for, if you're an English speaker, to access. But it was really then a limited list, often of auteurist cinema, Tarkovsky, of course, and Lang, and of course Lem, if you start to get into the fiction. But then also white men quite often. And this was just really, really limiting. And so very early on, I shifted my mission really to thinking about how can I bring in and lift up and amplify the work of people who are working on science fiction in other languages. And that was how I defined it because that was the space I was in. But that really means also other cultures and ways of being and so that's what my mission has been. Is there a question? I know there was another and something in the chat.
Well, I do have a history with what you're talking about, and it was the most frustrating chapter of my life. I spent 5 years collected short, short science fiction stories from people in about, I don't know, 25 countries in Europe, and I still have the stories with their permission to put them in a collection,
Mhm.
but nobody would publish it. I went to all the publishers. I tried even to get some independent Europeans. And I was working with Christian Thomas, who put out Planet Europa. It was a website that was a hub of all science fiction at that time around 2015. And I tried and I tried and I tried. And I heard only from the American Tor people and Beth Meekum and various people that worked in the field. They don't like translations and they don't like short fiction. So both of what I did were wrong, but it was right to get people introduced. And I still have it if anybody wants it.
Absolutely. I'm really glad to hear that. And I agree. I mean, I'm not glad to hear the experience. And I say that that type of publication often opens up, right, to other possibilities. I've run into some of those in Europe where they have published collections of stories from all across Europe, but it's really hard. There are always, like you said, challenges of market.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
mhm,
it's been over 10 years now, and I don't know if some of these people may have found other places to publish. I would have to, a lot of them are still alive. One of them has died, I know.
mhm,
So she was a Czech woman writer, very good writer, and she's gone. So I
mhm.
felt very, oh, what's the guilty? That's because I brought all these countries together just as Europe was going back into two parts. And I thought this would bring people together, and nobody got to see it. And I'm
Wow.
still very
Yeah.
unhappy
Oh,
about
that's
that.
so frustrating. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And that really goes to show, and I have this picture here because I just think it shows the Anglo-American perspective, right? Of the hands and thinking this is one world, but it's really just a one perspective. And we have to change about who is talking about this world. This is one insight into it. So then came the opportunity to talk about that a little bit more. And you probably know this wonderful journal that of extrapolation that Liverpool University Press has. It was founded by Thomas Clareson in 1959. And when that journal turned 50, they reached out to a bunch of folks. I'm on the editorial board, and they said, "Would you like to write something about the journal to celebrate the 50th anniversary?" It was, really short. And I said, "Absolutely." And so what I did at the time, this was in 2009, I thought, well, why don't I go and see how many essays in extrapolation deal with topics that are not Anglo-American science fiction? And so I looked through all of the issues that had come out since 1959 and counted them. And, I'm sure I made a couple of mistakes here and there. So, but in all of those at the time, there appeared to be 30 essays that had been published in extrapolation since 1959. And that came to 3% of all 960 entries listed. And many of the articles clustered around the writers Chapek, Lem, Verne, and Zamiatin. Um, and there were several in German, and then also Brazilian topics, and then a few that were in overviews of countries' genres, like on Hungary, and then an overview of Japanese science fiction, and then Chinese in 2002. And then I also said at the time that this seemed to be changing. That was from the mid 90s to today, that there had been a definite trend in the last from the 90s up to 2009. So fast forward, they asked me to do this again in 2019 at 60. So the first one that yes, it was called Science Fiction is an International Genre. If you want to take a look, it's in there. It's really easy to find an extrapolation. And then the next one I called, When Did You Last Read a Non-American Author? And I even focused there just on American because so often that's even the dominant, those are the dominant authors. This was then the past 10 years between 2009 2019 showed really significant change. And again, I went back and scanned the titles and the first few paragraphs of each issue. And just in that time, at least 15 articles had been published on non-Anglo-American science fiction. So really, it had already, before over the entire time, it had been about 30. And then suddenly, just over 10 years, there were 15. And it appeared too that the field had become more inclusive. There were multiple articles, and when I say inclusive, just even more inclusive on Anglo-American science fiction. So, for instance, there was more on African American science fiction. Of course, Octavia Butler was highlighted. So you still had the going to one particular author. Of course, there wasn't a concerted effort to support those type of authors either. Asian American and Indigenous authors. And there was a double issue on Indigenous futurisms in 2019. So really a shift, and that was International North American Indigenous authors. So it had shifted then to 9%. And if you included authors of color from North America, that then raised the percentage to 19%. So that was really much more interesting and beyond than Western European countries, like Germany and Spain, and then also more global representation, Afro-Caribbean, India, Brazil, Quebec, and Latin America. And now, and I'm happy to say that the field has really burgeoned, even continuing now. We're getting close to 10 years past, right, since 2019. There are a number of series that regularly publish world science fiction titles. Palgrave, of course, is one. I'm going to plug my own series here. This actually I'll show you. I'll talk a little bit more about a couple of publications that are on here. Oh, actually, hold on. Let before I get to this series, let me just say about a little bit about um, no, actually, let me go forward. Here, I'll do the series first. So yeah, so here's the series in Petra Lang, Oxford, and we've been in existence since what 2014, and had a couple of new publications come out just recently. You might know on the right, Guangzhou Lu. This book came out last year, The Boom and the Boom. It really takes a look at this wonderful parallel developments in contemporary British and Chinese science fiction. And then just out is Other Europes, and this is looking at science fiction cinema beyond the Anglosphere. So it's looking at others in Europe. So was there a question from in the chat?
No, just to comment again, we had Grace Dillon. I don't know
Hmm.
if you're familiar with Grace. I'm sure you
Absolutely, she's
are.
wonderful. Hmm.
Talking the Clouds was here as one of our guest speakers. So again, if you go to I can't spell when I'm in chat, but it's called the Tucson Hard Science SF channel or Science Fiction channel. I don't
Hmm.
remember. I didn't have time to put links in, and I don't want to add more to my burden because I might end up overburdening my system. So someone else might look it up and put the link in for the Tucson Hard Science Fiction channel. And there you can find Grace Dillon, who actually edited for the University of Arizona the first ever collection of futurism, speculative fiction, and science fiction from indigenous people. And that was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's such an important work. Check that out, definitely. I think that's there is one in our series too on Australian Indigenous science fiction if you're interested. We have a couple of more, I'll go this, we have a couple of more volumes that will be coming out in the next couple of years. So look there for that. I wanted to say just quickly that I think some of my publications sort of show also the transformation of the way that world science fiction or global science fiction is studied. That I started out on, if you see the left here, the science fiction literature in East Germany of looking at one particular national tradition. Then I shifted into film and I thought there's no volume out there that's really looking at world science fiction film. It was, as I said, often just looking at those particular films before. And I said, what's this look like for the world? But the approach that I took to this book, and I'm really proud of the book. It came out, I think it was 2014, I think is when it came out. But what I did then was a very geographical representation, sort of, well, who's not represented? Okay, let's make sure we've got the different continents here. Who's from there? So that was that, and that's often how collections were done at first, was just trying to get representation. But it was still a lot of the theory was coming from the West. So then, my wonderful colleague Anandita Banerjee at Cornell came to me and said, let's do a volume on alternate circuits. So beyond the Anglo-American circuit, which meant that people who are looking at the texts that are coming out in English and how that's working, particularly in Europe, in conversations as a discourse. Then what about those that were coming out of Eastern Europe and basically Russia, the Soviet Union? That often was a different conversation because different folks were reading those. That flowed then, that circuit certainly was into Europe and the United States, but much more then also brought in Latin America, Cuba, and that this was a different circuit of conversation and bringing in the global South, right, and bringing in the East. And that's what that collection is about, is really thinking in terms of what is this discourse like? How is it different? And how is that information flowing differently locally and globally? And then, of course, there's the Routledge Companion to Gender and Science Fiction, which just came out a couple of years ago. Looking this. Why I put this up here was this is really important. Is that for that we weren't looking at representation from country. We were really looking at how can people, different scholars from around the globe, contribute to the theory of science fiction. Now we're really centering that, right? Before it was, okay, the theory is an Anglo-American theory, and then we're going to add you folks on, and and you'll look at yourselves through our theory. But no, now we have folks all over the globe theorizing, coming up with different ways of defining science fiction and how it works in their local contexts, also in discourse with a variety of different circuits. And that's then coming together. And that was our approach for the Routledge Companion. We have a new project now I'm doing with wonderful co-editors Patrick Brock, Guangzhou Liu, Ida Yoshinaga, and Hugh O'Connell, called Redefining World Science Fiction. And this is built on the work of the past few years in multiple panels at ICFA and SFRA and Comparative Literature Association, really thinking about how now do we need to look at this concept of world in a different way. What does it mean to be doing that? And we're thinking in terms of ongoing critical debates about cultural production of global speculative media and intellectual questions that have been historically raised by different science fiction communities of practice, thinking in terms of re-theorizing from speculative cultures, reframing science and technology. What does science and technology mean? If you think in terms of also bringing in global South, East conversations beyond just the global North, reframing science and technology, as I said, just said, remapping world science fiction. So thinking in terms of how are we looking at the space, and then restoring community, the people, the communities, and not only writing and in media, but science fiction as practice. And how does that then also infer the science fiction and futurisms debates? I think there are a couple of questions. Gloria, do you want to bring in some of the folks from the chat? And then I have one more
All right.
section that I want to talk about.
Yes. Yes. Let me look and see. Again, I'm slow opening up because of my old machine. Let's see. Come on, chat, open up. Sonja, can you give an example of a story's premise that is different from Western SF? Says Bob McMillan.
Oh gosh, where do I start? I think that so many. If you even look at one that's maybe fairly well known to you, that's come out in a number of different manifestations. If you go to, and I apologize to fall back on a text that I know, really, really well, but I'm thinking of The Silent Star, First Spaceship on Venus, that was written originally by Stanislaw Lem, and the astronauts. That science fiction in the East was so often having to work within this need of to make the visions be conform with the current science as seen through Marxism, Leninism at the time, right? So you could talk about all sorts of different visions, but it had to be within this very realistic type of notion of what science was. And so those conditions of production changed the type of science fiction that came out. And but it also, if you go back to the Russian traditions, those were always much more a very philosophical type of writing, much less so than, I mean, that was certainly present in the West, right? And in the United States. But in the United States, you also very quickly had the pulp tradition that came up. And so you had a lot of different types of traditions. And in Russia, it kept very much where that of course came, that other tradition was there, but very much the idea of the the philosophical talking through. You had physics faculty, engineers often writing, so that was shifting the way that science fiction looked. And then you also look at, if you know Jemison or Okorafor, those are such very different traditions that are shaping the Afrofuturism and African futurism that you really have to go through as a Westerner and read and understand what those wonderful traditions are and how is that being imagined. The use of a shapeshifter in the story coming from local traditional storytelling. That's an example of the rich alternate sources that we need to also think about, and how that shifting what science fiction is or futurisms, what the ways of understanding the world around you, and to make space for those, and not just to say, well, they're copies of what we're doing, or they're imitations. That's missing what they're doing, because that's only seeing the future through this one lens and not even understanding what these other lenses are, and kind of missing out on what the message is. And so that's why what this group is doing is bringing in speakers like Grace Dillon to talk about what that is so essential. I can't do it justice because I don't come from that tradition. But there's so much out there now where you can go read and look, and some of these are those ways of approaching it. Other questions, Gloria?
Yes, I had one because you're dealing with people and you're such a hub. Who would be a good speaker on the writers that are shaping Afrofuturism? Do you have a recommendation?
Well, I would love to look a little bit so I can give you the best recommendations. If I
Oh,
can send that to you, I think
okay.
that would be wonderful.
That'd be
Because
really
I want, this gets to my next topic, that one of the things that I have committed myself to is to make sure that I don't always go back to the same names who come to my mind first, right? Because that then means that it's always the same people. And if I go to these collections, the whole idea is to bring in new voices, voices of traditions that we haven't heard about yet because these authors are either really young, or sorry, the not the authors, but the scholars who have the potential to study on them are either young, they're graduate students, they're new faculty members, often they're in American studies, and so they're not really thinking in terms of their own traditions yet. And I'm saying they're often in American studies because that's the space where studying science fiction and futurisms is honored. Often in other countries, the study of this genre is not seen to be a valid topic to study yet. Oh, and talk to Guangxiao Lu. I think this is changing in China now, just simply because of the success of a number of titles there, and particularly, of course, the Three Body Problem and the great international success of that and that series. But often when I'm looking for new people, I want to go ask around and say, who is doing the most exciting work? How can we amplify their work? And how can we create space like you were doing, trying to do, Gloria, with those short stories? How can we create space in these edited collections? Because they don't always have the resources to write a whole book on what they're doing, or that isn't something that would be incentivized in the position that they're in. But if we can start them with short articles, essays, and collections, that makes them more accessible to you. We're trying in our series maybe to even experiment with other languages. We do have something coming out in German, and we also then are hoping to have some abstracts in different languages as well, because we realize we're also writing in English, and that's again, you know, creating boundaries. But I will definitely follow up with you on that. Did you have another question?
yes, I think
Mhm.
I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
I have the whole manuscript of that collection and also the profiles of the writers. Some of them
Mhm.
are quite unknown and they're good. So I can just send that to you
Yeah,
and you
let's see
probably
again.
respond.
Yeah, let's see. Maybe things have shifted a little bit on
And I'm not
potentially.
trying to get it published. I mean,
Yeah.
just so that you can learn these names and there's contacts that go with them.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I would really love that.
Yeah.
Just so I want to make sure that I pay attention to the time. Just to the last thing that a couple things that I wanted to say here, and I've talked about that I've really tried to commit myself to helping graduate students and younger scholars to all around the globe. I'm very pleased when someone contacts me. I try and point them to conferences. One of the things too, then, as vice president of the Science Fiction Research Association, I helped to start the country representatives program there. If you go to the sfra.org/country representatives, they've got the link on the screen here. You can find a list of who then is a member of the SFRA and also then is representing their country. And that country, those representatives there are to promote and connect, right, with people in their countries, then also to promote the folks working in their country with the SFRA and just the not just SFRA, but the broader global science fiction community. Also, I AFA
Yeah.
and other spaces. The other, sorry, did someone want to say something,
I
or is
don't know.
just
I
background
think it
noise?
was just I think it was just the background noise.
Okay, so
You're
there's
all
that if you want to look there, and if you know someone, if there's a country not represented, that, and if you know someone who might want to represent that country, please reach out to the current vice president of the SFRA, because they oversee that and they meet, I think, quarterly via Zoom, and they're always wanting to bring on new folks. And sometimes they have multiple representatives from some countries as well. The other thing that I wanted to encourage, I'm pleased to be hosting the SFRA conference this June 2026 in East Lansing at Michigan State. I think in general, the SFRA has also become more global. The the it always used to hold a conference in Europe, right? And there was one in Liverpool, for instance. And then, of course, COVID happened and everyone moved online. And so that has definitely made people more comfortable with meetings that are virtual.
Yeah.
That just alone has allowed folks, to be more included. Was
Right.
there another question? And so then the SFRA was in Oslo. That was Bodhi's with Co-Futures Group in 2022, in Dresden in 2023. By the way, there was a roundtable that took place on East German science fiction. I've just had a student help me translate that into English. So be on the lookout for that whole conversation about East German science fiction in English from the major authors and publishers and some scholars. That should be hopefully out within the year. And then as Estonia, we had it in Tartu when Tartu was the European Capital of Culture in 2024. And so that was super exciting. Then it was back in the States in 2025, and it'll be at MSU this year. And then it's going to be in Seoul, South Korea. And that, I think, is a real statement by the association of the importance of the East now also. I know we tried to have it in Brazil a while back too, so hopefully they're still interested in maybe going back there at some point or in another place as well. But there's a definite commitment to globalizing this. The other thing I wanted to say, and this QR code takes you to our conference website. The our registration actually closed yesterday, but if you want to get in today and register really quickly it's a fully virtual, I should say fully hybrid conference. I'm sure we could still, if get in this weekend, we can still accommodate you if you want to register. But it's fully hybrid, so everything except for some special events we can't have online. But I'm pleased to say we'll have about 130 participants, half in person, half virtual, from all over the world presenting there. I think it's going to be really an incredible conference. And the theme is into the slipstream watering futures, because we're in the Great Lakes area. And so everything that we do, of course, we think in terms of water, particularly during the spring flooding right now, where the usual, a lot of us live near floodplains and we suddenly can't drive over certain streets because it's flooded, right?
May I get a
Um,
word in here?
yeah,
Because,
so now that's pretty much the end of my talk. I think, yeah,
well,
there's
I
my thank you, and I'll
think
just,
and I think we may actually try to join your conference. I didn't realize I still could.
yeah. Well, I had extended it to May 1st, but I'm sure that you should be able to get in there.
Uh,
And if you can't for some reason, please, just this weekend, because we really do need to close it. But go to that, and if you can't, email
when
me,
is the
and we can
conference?
make sure. So
I'm
I'm
sorry.
gonna. Sorry, go ahead.
When is it again? The conference?
It's June 17th through the 21st. It's actually the 21st is a travel day, so it's really June 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th.
Okay. Well, that's an opportunity for people that want to have more of this kind of a global interaction. Bob McMillan asked if you participate in the World Cons as SFRA. Are you?
I have not usually, simply because I only have so many travel funds, and I they run out after a couple of
Going
conferences.
to try
So
to get this worked out with the sun.
Right?
Someone's sound here.
we should
Let's
be
see
able to.
whose sound. I can't find it. They all look like they're,
Yeah, they do. I don't know.
but it wasn't me. There was
I, I,
nobody but
I
me.
believe,
I believe it was Melissa Tolliver, and I muted. I
Oh,
just
thank
muted
you.
that.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so no, I would love to go to lots and lots of different ones, but funds limit that. I will say that VICFA now, of course, in the fall, which is a virtual ICFA, is really good, and I often have pointed graduate students who have funding challenges quite often. But just the general state of higher education with so many cutbacks at the state and federal levels, our travel funding is being cut, so it's harder and harder to go to places, and we're doing more virtually.
I know, and well, I appreciate that, and I feel the pain and all of that, but I think that's where a volunteer effort like ours, which has no salaries at all involved and no monetization, can make up some of, not much, but we can do something. And people are often very willing to come and speak here because it isn't that big a commitment, but it also gets recorded and then it's out there. So I'm trying to fill some of the void with our little hard science fiction Zooms. And as you've really given such an overview for people, even about the conference, which I'm sure nobody but maybe me knew about until you talked about it this morning. So we thank you for all of your, it's almost so much news that it's hard to remember it or take it all in. So what I would recommend is that people review this, watch the video made from this, because it was really a lot of data to get into your heads. And I'm going to push it very strongly in our new Facebook page, Tucson Fans Do History. And that was Bob. He was asking another question. Let's see what that was.
Yeah, he's asking, does the Science Fiction Writers of America explicitly exclude foreign stories and authors? Do you know, I don't know the answer to that now because it's Science Fiction Writers of America. It could be that it's focusing on, I don't know how the definition of America is there, if they're North America or if it's US or I think it probably just depends on their mission there, but I don't know how to answer that. I would go to their website maybe, and it has a definition there. I did want to mention there's also a wonderful resource. I don't know if you know about this. It's called Every Single Sci-Fi Film Ever. And
Oh,
it's a wonderful resource that was started maybe about a year ago by a woman named Aisha Khan. And she just decided, I mean, she's sort of in the media industry, and she decided that she wanted to create a resource on science fiction film. And she's doing something similar, Gloria, to what your group is doing, in that she basically started with the early stuff and is inviting colleagues of people who work on film, people who work on science fiction, a number of different folks to come and talk about this real rich tradition from the silent era all the way. I think she might be in the 60s right now, is where she is. And she's really consciously trying to make it global. So,
Encyclopedia Global. Oh,
yeah.
what? That's really, really needed. And when as these things come up, I know you're very busy, but occasionally pop them into our new website, Tucson Fans Do History, because just to do a little promo for ours and then get some more questions from people like Alice, who's quite knowledgeable about Nezvadba in the Czech Republic. Um, what we're doing is we're trying to get some kind of a feeling for what went before. That's not just dry as dust curio shop. If you don't have a feeling for the shape of what went before, a lot of things are just repetitious because you'll repeat and you'll think something is new where it isn't, or it may have been done over in China and we didn't know about it. So we're not simply an Anglo-centric history, we're for global history of science fiction. And that has been so underrepresented. Do you ever go to science fiction conventions, Sonja?
I have been to ones in Germany before, yes, and
They're
they
probably different, but I'm talking about regular US regional ones.
no, I have not gone to US
I,
regional
I
ones, to be
think you
honest.
should.
Yeah.
If I could give you homework, I would say do it because there are some severe limitations of interest And people
Okay.
say, oh, it's just the way they are. They want to party and have costumes. No, I think they're being tracked that way. So that I think
Interesting.
we have some work ahead of us, because if you want to succeed with this, you're going to have to start meeting some of the regional, and I know they have them in Wisconsin, they have them in Chicago, and probably Michigan. Just meet some of the locals and see that it's gone into a party animal mode where they don't know who H.G. Wells was. They wouldn't even
Huh.
begin to know what
Hmm.
you're talking about. So
Hmm.
that's what our little web page is going to try to make Tucson one of the leading lights in history. We might even get a guest of honor, a science fiction historian. So I see Alice has her hand up. So go
And
ahead, Alice.
Gloria, thank you for that idea. And if you have
Terrible
any,
gulf between you and where they are, I'll tell you.
yeah, yeah, and I'm not quite sure who to contact. If you have, if I mean, we can do a swap on contacts.
Sure.
I would love
But
to do that.
just look up your local, the Midwestern names, put in regional science fiction conventions and then a state name, and it'll come right up.
Oh, okay, super. All right, thank you, thank you. Yeah,
That'll get
Alice.
started.
Mhm.
Alice, what do you have to
Hi.
say?
Hello. Thank you, Gloria, for that great idea. Thank you, Sonia, for all your hard work to bring us all together around the globe and around the universe. So that's a great thing. Actually, I don't have particular knowledge about Nesvatba, but my partner Greg, who is a translator from Czech, does know a lot about Nesvatba. But we do a very small publication called the Cafe Irreal, which, occasionally we publish a science fiction story, which I would call slipstream science fiction. It's not hard science fiction, but we do have, because we, and especially he, spend a lot of time in Prague in the Czech Republic, we try to have a more international focus. And our new issue just came online yesterday, and we have a Filipino writer, a Hungarian writer, two Czech writers, and writers from only one American writer, a British writer. So we do try to, our little tag is international imagination, and we do try to bring as many non-American writers into it as we can. So we're having a little bit of technical trouble with the Cafe Real, and our domain name isn't working, but I will put in the chat Cafe Real where you can see it, and
That's fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much.
happy to be a part of, you know,
And you do have an official approved by NESBOD page somewhere. Is it under?
yes, it's at the Cafe Real.
Okay.
And yeah, before he died, Nesbitt talked to Greg about it and got together with him. And he was a terrific, wonderful person.
He really was.
And so,
Okay.
I had the pleasure of meeting him actually in Berlin once. He came up for
Oh,
something, so that
oh,
was,
no
yeah,
kidding.
he was really exciting. Alice, that's tremendous. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, and I'll take a look.
yeah,
That's exciting.
thank you. We're having a little technical trouble right now with the homepage, but, please bear with us.
And
Thank you.
Alice is doing, and Greg, especially because he's a translator, they're doing wonderful work. He would never have been known outside of the Czech
Hmm.
Republic or in European circles, but now here he is. We tried to bring him to Tucson, by the way, Nesbod,
Oh,
but his wife had a kidney issue or a health issue. We had raised the travel funds and everything. This was in the 1980s. So, all right,
yeah.
I see Melissa Tolliver.
Yeah, I'm sorry earlier. I think my Zoom, whenever I talk or do something, it thinks I'm raising my hand. This time I'm really raising my hand. Um, anyway, I wanted to make a comment back about the science fiction conventions. I personally am involved with the ArmadilloCon convention in Austin, Texas. There are the ones like you were kind of talking about, but there are also many writers conventions or more focused on writers, and there has been a huge movement, including with ArmadilloCon, I'm proud to say, to get international authors, to find authors of color, to find um, indigenous authors, to find all kinds of different authors and have them not only come with their books, but to come and do help us do workshops and give lectures and those kind of things, so that we're getting a much more international and um, global uh, talks about from the actual people who are doing that sort of writing. And I wanted to say that because I've been doing this the convention, or been attending and doing the convention now for 20 years, and the difference between now and 20 years ago to me is so amazing, and I am so proud of not just our convention, but of many conventions, both in science fiction and fantasy, that are trying to bring in the global perspective. So I just wanted folks to know if you're
Also,
looking,
history.
That's
History is
great.
important. History matters.
absolutely.
Let's put it like history matters too,
Yes, absolutely.
because I think you
And
will agree that it's been at the low end of the totem pole.
oh, it was terrible.
It's
It
been
was
terrible.
terrible. That's why, because well, actually, when I was in high school, I got very interested in Russian literature and I got very interested in poetry, first of all, but then I discovered some translations of Russian science fiction authors, and it was amazing. Um, Lately, I've read some, I haven't kept up as much as I should, but I've read some Japanese and Chinese authors, and it is a whole different perspective.
Yes.
And it's very interesting to me to read it and to see how that works, and to try to put that kind of, think about that kind of perspective and not steal it or anything like that, but to try to work a little bit of that perspective into my own writing. Um, so that it's not so um, white centric, and that kind of thing, and to work characters in that are from other cultures that can then bring that perspective into the writing.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really fascinating to hear. Um,
And
I'm very energized about this idea now.
there is a there is a difference, excuse me, between these conferences, but the trend has always been away from, well, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was a trend to know our history, excuse me. But I think it also hurts interest in other areas, such as globalizing, if we don't even know where we came from. And certainly some of that is the work of Darko Subin and his bringing in at least European and Marxist studies. And nobody begins to know any of this. It's become party time, a lot of the
Mm.
regional conventions. So what I'm saying is, in order to bring in the public, not just academics, we need to reach across that border between academic conferences and regional regular science fiction conferences. So that's why I'm so thrilled that you joined our little webpage, and that's a step in that direction. So thank
Well,
you very much.
I really value that, and I think what I'll try to do too is for the public events that we have for our conference, because all of our keynotes are open, to the public in the area. I'll reach out to them and give them a heads up because they, like you said, that we aren't talking with each other. We've got the scholarly conferences and the cons, and I think we could be learning from each other in
And
some
that's a
really
whole new
exciting
audience.
ways.
That's a big one. So I didn't
Yeah.
mean to cut off your tail there, but that audience, they are fired up about all of these things, even the global things. They're already interested in it. You're just not. There's it's town and gown, and you know what that means. So
Absolutely.
now we
Absolutely.
gotta get
I
out
mean,
to them.
part of that is the Academy hasn't made our publications easily accessible. And I think the open access movement is really helping with that. For
Mhm.
instance, my book originally wasn't available, and then I bought the rights actually from the publisher, and it's now open access up on their webpage. And I've had so many more people engage with it because of that, because they can find it. It's not hidden in the library. So I think that many of us it's not a cheap thing to do. So if we, for instance, that collection, another collection that I'm working on, for it to be open access, it's $10,000. And we don't always have sources for those funds, but many of us are really trying to make that opens for a number of reasons. I wanted to mention I put in Aisha Khan's name and email address. Who she's the one who does the Every Sci-Fi film. I think it would be really cool if you had her
Oh,
to
I'd like to have,
on.
yeah.
Yeah, she's just a lot of fun. She's when she started, I think she had this idea, and she's just learned so much, and herself now has developed this incredible perspective. And it'd just be interesting, the two of you who have similar missions,
Mhm.
to share across, and she would be a very valuable person to make contact with and to have as a speaker.
Well, thank you. That's what I need. We don't even have a speaker for December, as far as I know, so I'll try to get her for December.
Yeah, I would think so. And then I definitely have some other possibilities of people. Now she's just so you know, she's in Dubai, I think is where she's centered. So and so there's a little bit of a time difference there, but just so you know.
Well, we did have someone from Qatar,
Mhm.
uh, from Doha, and we managed with him.
Yeah, yeah. That was great. That was a
You know
wonderful
about
one.
that. That was very good. So we appreciate all these new connections, and every time you come, it's like we have a quantum leap in global connectivity. So we should probably have you back annually or more because this things are moving along. But as I say, you would never know it at our regional, not Armadillo Con. Sounds like you're aware of some of these things, but in many of our regionals, that is something that people need to be connected to some of
Hmm.
this. And it's
Hmm.
good, it's synergistic and it's good for everyone.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that again, I'm at a university that has a mission, an outreach mission. And so we are actively incentivized and told you need to go do that kind of work. And so that's why I'm pleased to think about this, because that's something that not only do I want to do, but I also it's built into my position.
Wow. So we have a true ally in Sonja Fritzsche, and I'm so pleased, and Jerry and Hugh Connor and all of these people in SF, I was going to say SFRA. A lot of people don't even, that's another problem at conventions. They know SFWA, but they do not know SFRA. So these are little voids here that we can start to do. And I will send this off to the head of our Tucson Does History and make sure both of those people that founded our page hopefully will watch your talk.
And here I do have another name, and maybe I've given you Julian's before, but he's a colleague of mine. And if you're interested in someone who's working at the intersection of Afrofuturism and comics, and also Detroit, right? So
Mhm.
he's a wonderful person to have those conversations with. Very engaging speaker. He's done a documentary on Afrofuturism. So that I think would be a good place to start. And there are, of course, others that I could recommend after him. And he
Well,
he would be able to recommend folks.
it's L91, not 191. It's L91. Okay.
Yeah,
And
it's because it's Chambla. Yeah, BL91. Yeah. And I'll save the chat for you, Gloria, and send it to you.
okay, well, I think anybody can save chat. I think that's a separate
Yeah,
issue.
that's true.
So
Yeah.
go to your three dots or whatever it is
Mhm.
on my desktop. It's three dots, and then one of them is save chat. I'll just go ahead and save it myself. So please take the time to save the chat, and we will be putting this up hopefully in a day or two. We'll get our video up on YouTube.
That's
And
that's wonderful. And please continue to reach out to me for speaker suggestions.
yeah,
And because again, a lot of what I do is also facilitate that. I can't speak for people. I want to empower them so that their voices are heard. That's
well,
and
that's
that's
the
super
best.
important.
That is the best. There's a lot of people representing this and that group, but the best is to let people, in as much as you can, represent themselves
Yeah.
with their own voices. So,
Before we go,
like,
I did want to give a shout out to Marlene Barr because she was in the Rutledge collection with us. So I just wanted to say hi, Marlene.
I don't know if she wants to say a word or two. Marlene is also a very prominent person in the field of science fiction that we're honored to have here today. Is she still with us?
I'm not sure, but I just wanted to
No.
say that. I
Trying to
meant,
find the participants list. Oh, there she is. Sometimes people have trouble speaking. Maybe she's not able to speak. Are you able to speak out loud, Marlene, or just chat?
yeah, she might just, I think she just might be chatting today.
Yeah, sometimes it's the connection.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
she
Yeah,
has
well,
the
great.
different
Well,
thing.
thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's so great to see so many people so interested in this topic.
Well, thank you for coming, and I guess we will say until next time. And I believe next time is going to be from Argentina. Do you know Diego Golombek? Does anybody know Diego Golombek? I'll put it that way.
I know the name. I haven't met them, but I certainly know the name. So I think
That-
that'll be a wonderful conversation.
So if we can get it all working, it will be Diego next month. So thank you very much, Sonja, and we're going to let everybody off to the rest of their day. Adios.
Enjoy. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.